All right, so welcome back. This is for practice number 3. We just went over binary on Wednesday. We practiced number 2, include the polyatomics, and now we're going to include the bottom portion of the transitional metals and their various charges. So you should have out a periodic table and your common polyatomic ion worksheet. All right, let's review again on an ionic compound. Ionic compounds are going to include a metal and a nonmetal. We need to take a look at the name so that way that'll help us in our formula writing. Let me get my pen out and start. All right, so we're looking at the word copper. First of all, you need to find copper on the periodic table, and you'll notice it doesn't follow a trend on the periodic table. It is in the transitional metals, and that is why it also includes a Roman numeral. So if you're looking at your common polyatomic ion worksheet, go to the bottom portion of your common metals with more than one ionic charge. There are a few on that worksheet that only have one charge, zinc and silver at the very bottom. We use those two in lab often, and that's why we added those to transitional metals and their charges. But here we have copper 1. Now copper 1, if you look at the stock name of copper 1, it does have a symbol of Cu and a 1 charge. Copper 1 is also known in its classical name as cuprous, so I could have also written this name as cuprous bromide. Remember the note that I made that although I'm writing cuprous ion, you don't actually put the word ion in the name, so it would have been cuprous bromide. A little reminder from practice 2, it ended in IDE and it's not hydroxide or cyanide, so it comes from the periodic table. So looking at bromine on the periodic table, we see that it's Br symbol and a -1. We'll crisscross those charges. There's no polyatomics, so there's no parentheses necessary. When I rewrite the formula, I don't include the ones because the fact that I've written the atoms out is enough to include that. So copper 1 bromide, or cuprous bromide is known as CuBr. Let's look at the next one. We have an example, lead 2. So we can find lead 2 on our bottom portion of the common polyatomic ion worksheet, and we'll note that the symbol for lead is Pb. This is 2+, so I'm going to write 2+. There is another name for lead 2. Its classical name is plumbus. So the name I could have also used is plumbus sulfate. And by using the word plumbus, we would need to know that that is Pb2+, or lead 2. Sulfate is something at the top of the polyatomic worksheet that you needed to memorize, and we can include and remember that it's not in the periodic table because it does not end in IDE. Sulfate's symbol is SO4. It's in the second column, so you memorized it and learned it as -2. This is a polyatomic, and we know the rules of polyatomics. In my work, I'm going to show my parentheses. I'm going to take the values only without the charges and crisscross them down to the subscripts. What you need to note here is because both of them are 2, we do reduce them as we would in math class. And we would rewrite this formula as Pb without the parentheses SO4. So lead 2 sulfate is PbSO4. Lead 2 can also be used as plumbus, so I could have said plumbus sulfate is PbSO4. All right, let's look at the reverse. And if we are given a formula, how do we know what the name is? First, as in the practice of worksheet 2, note that there are way more than 2 atoms, way more than a binary compound here. So we can circle the portion of the name that we need to memorize. We can also make note that this is not a trend on the periodic table. Copper has 2 choices. It can be either copper 1 or copper 2. So our next step is looking to see at what C2H3O2. The word C2H3O2, the name of it, is called acetate. It's in the first column. So I'm going to write acetate over here, acetate, because we know that that's the name of that. It also has a charge of -1. What we can notice is there's no parentheses around C2H3O2. So that indicates in order for them to be neutral, this copper would have had to be +1. So the copper of choice, the copper that it's used, is copper 1. So copper, parentheses, Roman numeral. The way to do a Roman numeral on the computer is Shift and an I. Shift and I. That's how we'll do copper 1. It also has a second name, so in our practice, make sure that you're practicing both. Copper 1 is also known as cuprous, and we don't use the word ion. That's just including what it is without the actual full name, cuprous acetate. So if you listened and watched my number 2 practice, you'll have noticed my cuprous, which is a golden doodle. He's the color of a cuprous. He's my dog, and that's where I got my name for Cooper, cuprous. Side note. All right, so let's take a look at FeS. FeS, we'll look on the periodic table. This is a transitional metal. So when we look up Fe, those are the ones you need to memorize. Until we know the memorization of those, take note that this could be iron 2 or iron 3. Those are the 2 charges possible. We need to figure out which one it is. We have a single atom. So this came directly off the periodic table. So the name of it would be sulfide because we ended in IDE, anything off the periodic table. Sulfur has a -2 charge, which means that to make this atom, or I'm sorry, to make this ionic compound neutral, it would have had to be a +2 charge because there are no subscripts on the bottom of either one of these. So with that note, I know this is iron 2, so I will put iron, parentheses, 2. Again, shift and an I, double I actually in this case. We also need to practice the classical name because you will be responsible for knowing both the stock and classical. So iron 2 is also known as ferrous sulfide, and that's why we'll write it sulfide. Note the name, capital, space, lowercase for the second portion. So iron 2 sulfide or ferrous sulfide is FeS. So at this point I want you to practice number 3 and then check your own answers. If you have any problems that were incorrect, please review this video.